Sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, welcome along. A packed show for you. We have all the fun stuff. The famous slogan of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is, "The Mounties always get their man." The British Constabulary hardly ever get their man, but they do get you. Because, frankly, that's a lot easier. The judges have nixed Nicola Sturgeon's second referendum on Scottish independence. Is that good for the Union or bad? And have you had this month's booster yet? Do you like the old jabber, jabber, jabber? Jabber, 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 said the monkey to the chimp. Go.
Dabba, 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 said the chimpy to the monk. Dabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
Well, the old abba jabba 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 goes on. At the G20, Rishi Rich and his chums just signed on to vaccine passports as a requirement of international travel. And did you think these strapping young Albanian lads arriving every night were costing you millions? No, they're costing you billions. That's Rishi Rich-sized dosh. Kelly J. Keane, Alexandra Marshall, Jamie Jenkins, and, of course, David Starkey are here. Plus, of course, the most important part of the show, no disrespect to David Starkey, but the most important part is David's close, but he's not as important as you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. All coming up after Bethany Elsey with the latest news.
Hello there, I am Bethany Elsey, here to bring you up to date from the GB Newsroom. Scotland's First Minister says the next general election will act as a de facto referendum. It's after the UK government won a legal battle in the Supreme Court, preventing a second independence vote. Nicola Sturgeon has accused Westminster of blocking Scotland's voice from being heard. She says a special SNP conference will be held next year to determine a way forward.
A so-called partnership in which one partner is denied the right to choose a different future, or even to ask itself the question, cannot be described in any way as voluntary or even a partnership at all.
The Home Secretary has admitted the government has failed to control the UK's borders and blamed Channel migrants for the overcrowding at processing centres. Almost 4,000 migrants were being held at the Manston Centre in Kent earlier this month. That's more than double its capacity. During a parliamentary hearing, Suella Braverman was asked whose fault it was that that was allowed to happen.
I'll tell you who's at fault.
Yeah.
It's very clear who's at fault. It's the people who are breaking our rules, coming here illegally, exploiting vulnerable people and trying to abuse the generosity of the British people. That's who's at fault.
Some homeless people have accused the government of prioritising illegal migrants over their welfare. More than 300 asylum seekers have been staying at the Metropole Hotel on Blackpool's seafront for the past year. A homeless group in the city, which includes an armed forces veteran, have been speaking to GB News. They say they're living rough on the streets, while those who've crossed the channel in small boats are put up in a nearby hotel.
It's wrong because you're looking at the real homeless here, and with them putting them in there and then leaving us on the streets, it's wrong.
In other news, the Prime Minister has appointed a senior lawyer to investigate bullying claims against the Deputy Prime Minister. Dominic Raab requested an independent inquiry after 2 formal complaints were made. He says he's confident he'll be cleared of any wrongdoing. And Ukraine's president will address the United Nations Security Council in an urgent meeting later, following Russian missile strikes on key infrastructure. It's as the entire Kyiv region has been left without power and water supply, and half of neighbouring Moldova is also in blackout. In southeastern Ukraine, a newborn baby has been killed after an airstrike hit a maternity hospital. The 2-storey building was reduced to rubble, and rescue workers have been trying to find survivors. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
Thank you, Bethany. Just the thought of Dominic Raab being beastly reduces me to a quivering lump of jelly. There's a lot of competition for the annual award for the most miserably failed British institution. We could give honourable mentions to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which is basically now an aquatic Uber service for Albanian sex traffickers, or the National Health Service, which has done a splendid job of ramping up its waiting list to well over 10% of the entire population of the United Kingdom. That's a long list, but the good news for you, Mrs. Gladys Scroggins of 27 Acacia Gardens, is that you've now moved up from number 7,437,212 to number 7,437,209. Oh no, wait, sorry, you're back down to 7,437,210. There's an Albanian with an ingrowing toenail that needs seeing to. Or the European Court of Human Rights is going to come down on the government like a ton of post-Brexit Euro bricks. Sorry about that. Oh yeah, the annual award for the most miserably failed British institution. There remains no more comprehensively failed institution in the realm than the British Constabulary. Britain is the land where everything is policed except crime. If your car's broken into, there's not a copper to be found, but if you misgender someone on Twitter, a 6-man social media SWAT team will be at your door in minutes. The public tends to assume that when you call 999 and get redirected to the answering machine at the Central Customer Service Centre on Rock Hall, it's because the constabulary are off doing their beloved precision Macarena routine at the Lincolnshire Pride Parade or the Ballymena Ramadan Festival. The most embarrassing headline in the history of so-called British journalism from the Lincolnite. Look at this headline. Police officers impress crowd with Macarena dance at Lincoln Pride. I seriously doubt whether there is a word in that headline that is true. Nobody's impressed by the Macarena. It's a dance for people who can't dance. Try doing it on Strictly and see what Len Goodman or Darcy Bussell make of it. Nevertheless, after I mocked the Lincolnshire Police's Macarena on this channel, the police service of Northern Ireland rose to their defence by doing their own Macarena in support of their brethren in Lincolnshire. Oh, look at that. Oh my word, that's in Derry or Londonderry. It doesn't matter whether you say London, Derry, because on a small island riven by centuries of sectarian division, finally both communities came together to agree that the PSNI totally suck at dancing. The Royal Ulster Constabulary, say what you like about them, but they could do a mean paso doble. The Black and Tans could do a passable foxtrot. Even the Royal Irish Constabulary was renowned in the 19th century for its mazurka. But these god-awful police Macarenas are not a small thing. They symbolise what's gone wrong with British policing. As Parm Sandhu, former chief superintendent at Scotland Yard, said on this show just a couple of months back, only 1.3% of all recorded crime even leads to a summons, to a court appearance, never mind a conviction. And we know that that 1.3% is overstated because the Met and other forces are massaging the figures by not recording a lot of crime. So the crime clear-up rate in the UK is now all but statistically undetectable. So it's not like a beloved community institution letting its hair down and doing some club-footed Macarena. It's a totally failed institution that's Macarenaed its way miles from its mission. And the Macarena is the way of the plods putting their arrhythmic flat feet on one side of the scales of the culture war, particularly with respect to transgender activism. The British police are rubbish. Rubbish. When it comes to burglary, rape, grooming gangs, Albanian prostitution rings, but they're on it in seconds if it involves women with penises. As you know, these days, huge numbers of women are hung like stallions, and apparently that's the way the coppers like it, so that's what they spend the whole day investigating. In September, Kelly J. Keane, founder of the group Standing for Women, went to Brighton for a rally called Let Women Speak. 2 months later, the Sussex police telephoned.
So someone has actually made an allegation against you about a hate crime. So we do actually need to speak to you about that matter as part of our investigation.
Yeah.
So what we do need to do, we need to get you to come down to Brighton, ideally, so we can have this voluntary interview.
And when you say hate crime, specifically what hate crime would it be? Because I think to be a hate crime, there has to actually be a crime. So what is the hate? What is the hate attached to?
I'm going to read out. So it's the crime is use of words or behaviour to stir up hatred on the grounds of sexual orientation. So basically, it's going to be a voluntary interview. So it's the story as well. So, you know, we're not putting anything against you. You can bring a solicitor with you if you'd like. It's just so we can bottom out your side of what's gone on.
Oh, your side of what's gone on. And all you have to do is give up a day to travel from Wiltshire to Brighton with your solicitor. Kelly J. Keane joins me now. What is this all in reference to? Because as I recall from your event in September, it was in fact the trans activists who were masked and rather menacing in their masks who disrupted your event.
Yeah, they did. I mean, a baby was called a Nazi and a fascist and sworn at, but that was one of the local Labour staff members. So, yeah, the trans activists are terribly badly behaved. They like to intimidate women. There were a few arrests. One of the people arrested, not necessarily on the TRA side, but certainly shouting at women, had a bag of knives. So, and also everything I said had a policewoman about 2 meters away from me. So she could hear every single word I said. This is a phishing exercise. This is because trans activists, particularly men, who call themselves women, think that they can silence women by any means necessary, and that includes using the police. This is my 5th time having the police wanting to talk to me because I'm an activist. And I'm an accidental activist. I'm not some sort of dyed-in-the-wall activist who just finds a brand new cause, but I was interviewed under caution for 6 tweets back in 2018. That same year, I was interviewed again for 2 comments on YouTube at the behest of Susie Green. I was arrested and put in the cells for actually having a political meeting during lockdown. And then I had 2 police at my house only a few months ago because I was being untoward about paedophiles. And now we've got this.
Yeah, well, it's great to know that the police, who don't investigate burglary, don't investigate grooming gangs, but they will investigate people who say mean things about paedophiles. Why are the police like? I mean, I really can barely express my contempt for the British police these days. But why is it that no matter how many politicians warn them to stop wasting time like this, they have decided that the priority of British policing is transgender activism?
Well, because they've been captured ideologically by Stonewall with the Stonewall Diversity and Inclusion Index, which they pay a handsome sum. My own police force has spent £10,000 on that in the last 4 years. And I can tell you, I certainly don't feel any safer. So it's really, I think we've got into a culture in this country, more generally, not just the police, although you would expect the police to be immune, of virtue signalling as opposed to doing something. So if I'm running a council and I don't necessarily have lots of access for people with disabilities to come to work, but I can put a pride flag up, then I can tell everyone that I'm kind and inclusive, even if I have absolutely no intention of making some people in my locality have an easier access to coming in and being employed by me.
But as J.K. Rowling, in a supportive tweet for you, pointed out, these people advertising how kind they are actually the kind going around masked and breaking up your event. And there's something disturbing about the way the forces of law enforcement have taken one side in there. I mean, they're harassing you. This lady on the telephone to you basically threatened to, she said, oh, it's voluntary for you to come to Brighton, but if you don't come voluntarily, we're going to have you arrested. So it's the point is to make an example of you so that 10,000 other people who might happen to agree with you decide they're just going to keep their heads down on this.
Yeah, I think it is partly that. I think, look, often in these situations, there's some people with nefarious reasons and there's a lot of incompetence and stupidity. And that seems to be what is happening mostly for the police force. So my organisation, Standing for Women, we did a survey of a big research project into all of the police forces in the country. And there is not one that differentiates a female officer from an officer who calls himself a woman. Not one. So that will mean in places in that police force or in the role of a police officer, if they have to search a female suspect, for example, or they have to be the female officer, it might not be a female at all. And the reason that that's happening is because the government is gutless. The government won't actually make decisions on this, and they leave it to the police constable. And the police constable, or rather the chief of police, is not going to put himself at risk because he might lose his job.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. We did. Thank you very much, Kelly J. Let us know, because if we'll be back with you if these bozos at the Sussex Police do decide to send a team to arrest you, because this thing has gotten out of hand now. It's a complete betrayal of Sir Robert Peel's entire legacy of British policing, where he said the police are the public and the public are the police. This is terrible. We did ask the Chief Constable of Sussex Police to join us. That would be a lady called Jo Shiner, who becomes the latest Chief Constable to decline to appear on this show. There she is. There's Chief Constable Shiner. We're trying to collect the entire set. I think West Mercia's was the first to decline to appear on this show. Andy Freeman of Sussex Police did, though, respond. We are aware of a recording of a call between a police officer and individual in relation to an investigation in Brighton from September. The individual was asked to assist with our inquiries by attending a voluntary interview. We're reviewing the matter and will liaise with the parties involved directly. If you're in Sussex right now and you just looked out your window and there's some ne'er-do-wells breaking into your car, this is what your lousy police are preoccupied with. Up next, we'll get your reaction, GBViews at gbnews.uk. And the judges say no to another Scottish referendum. So the Scots constabulary aren't going to be Macarenaing off into the sunset anytime soon. David Starkey is here on that. And we have my favourite Australian, Alexandra Marshall, and what is it, my 12th, 14th? 17th favourite Welshman, Jamie Jenkins, both standing by. Don't touch that dial, we're coming right back.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. GB News is the People's Channel, so let's channel what the people have to say. I think we wanted to know what you thought a woman was. That's what we can't, inflation, the Ukraine war, that's all too complicated, but maybe we can figure out what a woman is. William says Mark should have studied more during his biology class. Science is crystal clear in defining a female. I think that was my reference to the police having a thing for all these bepenist women. Apparently the United Kingdom now, what is it, 93% of women are hung like horses? I think there's still 3 or 4 non-bepenist women. I think there's one on an outlying Shetland island. I think there's another up near the Giant's Causeway. I don't know where the third is, so you might meet her in the bar tonight if you like the old-fashioned kind of women. Not many people do these days, of course. Phil says, do we need to keep asking this? A woman is a grown female. I think that somebody should make that into a song. Nothing else. A female, my other half. Nothing else can apply. I'm getting sick of wackos with a penis who think they should go into the women's because they identify as a woman in a skirt. And David says, if you have to transition into a woman, it's because you're not a woman. And Lee says, someone with a womb, not a penis. Very hard. But wait a minute, don't they have all these pregnant men now? All the men have wombs. All the women have penises and all the men have wombs. It's fantastic. I give it another 6 months and we'll all have changed sides and then all this nonsense will stop. The UK Supreme Court, not an institution I have a lot of time for. It's a modish Blairite thing. But the UK Supreme Court has ruled that Nicola Sturgeon's ministry in Scotland cannot hold another independence referendum without Westminster's permission. The decision was unanimous. That's why they didn't take a lot of time over it. And the judgment does a lot of cut and pasting from a Canadian Supreme Court decision on Quebec's secession. The eminent historian, Dr. David Starkey, is here. David, Nicola Sturgeon wouldn't be doing this if she didn't think the Union were in some way vulnerable in a way that it hasn't been for a long time.
That's right. And she also made a point. We shouldn't just dismiss what Nicola Sturgeon says because it's that kind of awfully grating voice, that drill voice. She made the reference to Kosovo and she talked about the right of a free people to determine their future. The trouble is the Blair government, you've just mentioned now, gave exactly that right. Only the people of Scotland were invited to vote on devolution. And what were they promised? They were promised a parliament. Now, in English or Scots, a parliament is the assembly of a free people. Right. It is the sovereign assembly of a free people. So the very way in which Labour brought about, New Labour, call it what you want, brought about devolution, effectively concedes nationhood and political identity to Scotland. So in one sense, Sturgeon is right.
Yes, that's actually quite an because
it's a vitally important point.
You only use the word parliament if it was the parliament of a sovereign
That's what the word means.
jurisdiction.
That's what the word means in English or Scots. I mean, it's the key. It's the key to the whole separation into dominions of the British Empire. And the moment at which, Canada becomes fundamentally self-governing and you can conceive of a Canadian nation is when you get a parliament. I mean, the full independence from the crown, the full control over foreign policy comes much later. But that is the parliament. It's the core. It's a core of English conservatism. It goes back to the Middle Ages. It's how we expressed ourselves as a nation. And again, it's just getting away from Scotland, which gets boring on this. It's what Brexit was about. It is that fundamental notion, or indeed the American Revolution, that has driven the peculiar political voyage of the English-speaking peoples, which is this idea of self-government through a representative assembly.
But Blair called it the Scottish Parliament, didn't he? Because he thought if you let them have the names of these things, then they won't notice they haven't actually got the real.
I mean, it was a bit like the rest of Blair's government, which was a complete playing with words. But unfortunately, words. Why are we using words? Words have got consequences. And of course, the other thing that was the point about devolution, that extraordinary, now rightly forgotten figure, Donald Dewar, father of the nation. Who cares about Wallace when you've got Donald Dewar? He thought it was a political fix. He assumed that devolution would destroy Scottish nationalism. I mean, deranged, the degree of political silliness. But the other thing, and I think again, now taking this seriously, that it is not only the whine of Nicola Sturgeon that is so offensive to the ear. It's
if you're still wondering, by the way, what a woman is, then according to David Starkey, it's Nicola Sturgeon.
Or indeed, it's what I call cars that have that squeaky noise when you refuse to put your seatbelt on. But the point about Sturgeon is the affectation of victimhood. I mean, this seems to me to be as somebody who was born just south of the Scottish border, has always been very interested in Scots history. It is a shame to the Scottish past. The Scots were not victims in 1707. No. Scotland wanted membership of a Greater Britain for access to the British Empire.
Yes.
And what did the Scots do? They were they were generally speaking the most active, the most forceful, the best educated imperialists.
And everywhere you go around the world, everything.
Your entire banking system in Canada is Scottish.
And the crazy thing about when they quote that Supreme Court judgment from Canada is that if you talk to a Quebec secessionist, the Scots are the guys who've had oppressed his people in Quebec for generations. So this idea that they're the oppressors in Canada, but the victims in the British Isles
is deranged. It's deranged. But it's a kind of corruption, I think, that consumes people when they get this violent, destructive sense of nationhood. I mean, one of the problems, I think, in Scotland is that you had a very distinctive sense of Scottish nationhood. Remember, the person who invents the idea of Scotland, the bagpipes, the kilts, Balmoral, the whole lot, is Walter Scott, who is a passionate unionist. But it was essentially, it's like Scottish expression in Canada, why you've Highland regiments in Canada. It's a cultural expression.
Right.
Whereas what she's tried to do is to turn it into something much more Central European. No, I'm being serious. It's Germanic. In other words, the kilt, dare one say it, has shifted into something awfully like lederhosen. I once made. Let me tell you the joke, because it's a very good one. I pointed out we're really going to get it. We're going to get a police call after this one. Just wait for it. What is the resemblance between Scottish nationalism and indeed the Nazi Party? Think about it. They both have a symbol of a twisted cross. They both have a single diplomatic document that destroys them, Union or the Treaty of Versailles. And finally, of course, the elderly, middle-aged male supporters are very fond of exposing their knees.
Okay.
But I mean.
Okay, but don't try goose stepping in a kilt. The neighbours aren't going to like it. Let me come at it. In fairness to Nicola Sturgeon, then, let me come at it Let me come at it the other way. Is Britishness on its way out? Is Britishness not so long ago? You know, if you had an Australian passport 50 years ago, it said British passport Australia on it. They were the British nation in the Pacific. That's shrunk. It shrunk to these islands. Southern Ireland went a century ago, the Irish Free State. Is it naturally just shrinking further and further?
You see, I don't think there's ever been a British nation. This is to misunderstand. We are a united kingdom of different nations. Britain has always been, from 1707, it's always been multinational. British is essentially a term for export. You're British abroad, you're Scots, you're English, you're Welsh, you're Irish at home, which is why the first, we're celebrating, those interested, are celebrating international football. The first internationals were between England and Scotland.
Right.
It was, and again, it's a new Labour thing. There's and particularly a Gordon Brown thing. There's an attempt at identifying a peculiar British nationhood in the 1990s, going right through to Brown's period as Prime Minister. The historians who tried to write about it, invent it, like Linda Colley. It never worked except for one single and increasingly important group. Immigrants call themselves British.
Well,
in other words, they buy into the notion of identity as non-cultural. Identity simply as a matter of legal status.
Right. And what then about something like Rule Britannia, Britain's never, never, never shall be?
There were tiny moments in the 18th century when you play, but again, the word Briton, you laugh at it. It's ancient Britons, it's woad. Nobody ever called, no, isn't it? Nobody ever called themselves, and what goes on under a kilt.
This is like what not to wear. It's woad, kilts, lederhosen by our fashion correspondent, David Starkey. I don't know how we started off with a perfectly sensible Supreme Court judgment, and we wound up climbing into the woad and lederhosen. Thank you very much, David. It's always good to see you. The world's leaders are back in their dreary little provincial capitals for a few days, taking a break from the oldest established permanent floating crap game of international summitry. Last week it was both the G20 in Bali and COP27 at the luxury Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. If you can't keep them straight, it doesn't matter, because the final communiques are interchangeable and very disturbing. Alexandra Marshall's here on that. And then the stat man, Jamie Jenkins, swings by. Lots of good stuff still to come. See you in a minute.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio, and online.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We talk regularly about the nightly arrival of so-called asylum seekers on the southern shore. They get put up in hotels at your expense. So far this year, more than 42,000 strapping young fellows have arrived. I think there's a couple of women and elderly men amongst them, but basically 9 out of 10 are strapping young fellows. And that's more than all other years on record combined. As Jamie Jenkins, formerly of the Office for National Statistics, puts it, the hotel bill this year for these guys steady on now, it's going to be between £2.5 billion and £3.5 billion. £2 billion, £3 billion, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Jamie is here with us once again. I mean, these are really extraordinary sums that we're now blowing through on this, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you think, what does £2.5 billion mean? Well, when Liz Truss tried to cut the top rate of income tax, doing kind of her failed premiership as the Prime Minister, there was absolute uproar, and that was around £2.5 billion, the cost of doing that. So
yeah, so basically, if we believe the official version, the markets decided Liz Truss had to go because of a £2.5 billion tax cut. But when you give £2.5 billion to put up a bunch of Albanians in hotels, the markets are cool with that?
Well, it seems to be the way, Mark. It's with Liz Truss, it was more a case of, well, you haven't explained how you're going to pay for it. But the markets don't seem to worry about, well, how are you going to pay for the £2.5 billion? Now, why are we in the position that we're in? You've talked about we've hit over 40,000. If we carry on the way things are going, we'll probably hit about 53,000 coming across the channel. That's slightly down to what we were thinking might happen a couple of months ago. And the only reason for that, the only thing that seems to be working to reduce the numbers is the weather. So we've seen very few coming over in November so far. We've had many days where there's been zero coming across because of the weather. But you can blame them, people coming over, but you can't kind of divorce the fact that the government and the civil service are a bit at fault to this as well, Mark, because if you think of all the people that came across in 2021, to around 28,000 people.
Right.
Recent numbers came out that only 4% of those applications have been processed. So if basically you're talking nearly 27,000, 26,000 people.
So just to stick with the math on that, that basically means they only processed 1,000 of the 2021 intake.
Yeah.
And so presumably this year, the 55,000 you say will be coming over. And if they only process another 1,000, that's 54,000 added to the 27,000. I mean, pretty soon we're going to have the equivalent of Edinburgh or Cardiff or Belfast staying in hotels.
And that's the way things are heading now. Suella Braverman was saying today they're finding it even more difficult now to book accommodation. Well, of course, you've got all these people coming over. Remember, when they come over, they can't work until they've gone through the asylum system. And if you've got 96% of people who made their application in 2021 not being processed, you're going to be waiting for those. You think of it in terms of a backlog. They've got to do those first before they even get on to the 53,000 that they do this year. Now, it doesn't look like these numbers are slowing down anytime soon. So you're going to be going from 53,000, maybe 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000 next year. And if this carries on, you're right, you're going to have huge numbers. And where are you going to put them? We've already seen stories that you're covering, Mark. You know, these aren't hotels that you travel lodges and Premier Inns. Obviously, I've stayed in them, they're fine. But we are talking some premium places, 4- or 5-star places that people are being put in. And on the news today, you've seen people in Blackpool for over a year where you've got homeless people, British people, stuck on the street.
Yeah, we just saw that on the news bulletin. There's actual citizens of the United Kingdom sleeping rough on the streets, and the hotels are full of people who arrived in the last couple of weeks. But just to look at it the way the BBC and The Guardian do, they think the issue is that we're not processing people efficiently enough. Well, if you can only process 1,000 people a year and say you've got 50,000 coming this year, I mean, the cost of hiring, you basically have to multiply your processing capacity by 50. How is that remotely feasible?
Well, the government are talking, as usual, bringing in some private companies to start doing the processing. So maybe you've been covering Serco, so maybe the Serco are putting them up. Maybe Serco will be asked to look at the kind of process in them as well. So it's got a good business model if you're one of these private companies, because they're coming in, they're getting paid to put them up in places, and then they probably get paid to look after them. Now, tomorrow, Mark, and I'll tweet about this tomorrow, and maybe we can discuss it next week or so. We get the latest figures on which countries they are coming from. Now, in the last set of figures, we did see Albania become the biggest nationality to start with. We probably will see that get even bigger for the latest figures. But I suppose one of the silver linings with regards to the hotels is we are noticing that some of the Albanians that are coming over are vanishing. So they're not costing to go in the hotels because they're just vanishing. They're not coming through the legal ports. They're coming through over the channel. They're vanishing. So they're not costing us, but you've got to be careful in terms of where they're going.
That's great news. The Albanians are vanishing. Well, let's just see how many vanished Albanians can a society take, because when it's these big nights, when the weather's calm and you get 1,000 people coming, you know the exact numbers better than I do, but that's roughly half the number of babies born in England and Wales that day. I think that's 2,100 or something like that, babies born in England and Wales in a typical day. So effectively you're increasing your population by 50% just from the guys arriving on the southern shore.
That is correct, and obviously we've also got the kind of what you would class the legal immigration to put on top of that, and the ONS project about 200,000 on top of that. So this is a critical issue. You've raised a good point with the births there, Mark, in that we do have a critical problem in this country. We are not having enough births to actually sustain the population in the long term, to actually pay the taxes for all these people who are living older. But all these people coming over on migrant boats aren't helping the matter because they can't go and work in the first place. So the government really does need to get a grip of it. And what have they done? Thrown more money to France. It seems to be the more money you give France, the more migrants to come over the channel. So it doesn't seem to be a very good business model for us.
Well, we're giving money to France, we're giving money to Rwanda, we're giving money to Albania to make Albania more agreeable. I mean, good luck with that. And now we're giving more money again to France, so we'll be giving more money, I take it, to Rwanda and to Albania. I mean, at some point, this is going to crack. It's going to crack the health service. It's going to crack the social services. There's simply not going to be young people can't get houses, can't get flats, can't get bed sits because of all the people arriving every night.
Well, I think the first thing that's going to crack is probably the Conservative Party. This is going to become one of the biggest problems for them in the next general election. And if they don't get a grip on it, and Sunak doesn't seem to be having a grip on it, the voters will be voting with them and probably kicking them out. Whether Starmer can sort that out is another question again.
Do you think people understand the logic of the arithmetic here, that if you let in 27,000, you process 1,000 of them, you let in 55,000, you process 1,000 of them, you let in 75,000, you process 1,000? Do they understand the ruthlessness of the arithmetic here?
No, and I don't think enough's been shone a light on the government and the civil service in this, because if they process them faster, some would argue if they do process them faster, you may encourage more people to come over.
Yeah.
So there's a chicken and the egg here, and they do need to solve this problem, but we haven't seen any proper solution yet, Mark.
No. You're telling me. Thank you very much, Jamie. It's always great to see you. We have Miss Alexandra Marshall from Australia standing by. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The COVID feels very 2020, don't you think? Wrong? A story from today's New York Post. Quote, masks and social distancing should be mandated or encouraged in public to protect people from possible long COVID, according to a new report commissioned by the US Department of Health and Human Services. Long COVID. Put your mask back on. It's COVID-stan now and forever. Last week, G20 leaders Rishi Rich, Jacinda Trudeau, Joe Biden signed on to a very disturbing idea, a global digital vaccine passport, a pet project of the World Health Organization. So any old Albanian can walk into your country, but you will need the state's permission to leave this benighted land. Alexandra Marshall from The Spectator Down Under joins us. Alexandra, this was one of those sort of conspiracy theory things just a few months ago, but actually if you read the communiques of these global summits now, they're actually galloping ahead with this digital identity thing very fast.
Well, I actually wrote a very large takedown of digital identity last year, very early in the year last year, and people thought I was a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, no, this is in legislation. It's actually written in Australian legislation, passed by a federal Liberal government, which is conservative for those who are following along. And now we've had the new Labor Prime Minister, we call him Airbus Albo, has signed on to this new digital ID along with all of your guys. You know, they're so worried about the climate change and they parade around in private jets, and so now they want to track us, not them, just us, with this new digital ID.
Yeah, it's very weird because they're not even hiding it. They go and they hold these summits in Bali and Sharm el Sheikh down. They never hold it in Cloncurry, say. No offence to your fair town in the outback in Queensland, or which I think it's Queensland. But they go to these exotic resorts and announce plans to prevent any of the rest of us going to these exotic resorts. And yet at the same time, a lot of people seem willing to put up with being told where you can go and where you can fly and what you need to do to board the plane. People are going along with it, aren't they?
Well, it's always a Swiss ski lodge or some kind of Pacific Island resort where these things are taking place. As you say, they're never slumming it anywhere with the peasant class. But what I find is most people don't believe it's true. It's not that they agree with it or they think it's okay. They actually don't quite grasp that this is going to be a thing. And my favourite part about, our legislation, which I presume is the same as yours, because we both copy-pasted it from the World Economic Forum, is that it says that this digital ID is going to keep us safe from COVID. And I'd love to know how they're going to justify that, given that vaccine passports, which was the little trial run of digital ID, didn't do much good in the whole keeping us safe from a virus scenario. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's never tested. You never hear a journalist actually question a politician. Like, we've had an election going on right now in our state, happening on Saturday, and there has not been a single question to the Premier about what's going on. Not one. No one is interested and no one wants to talk about it.
No, and that was actually probably the most tyrannous jurisdiction anywhere in His Majesty's dominions during these last 3 years. You're talking about Victoria. But you're right, the vaccine passport, the fascinating thing about it is the vaccine doesn't work, but the passport supposedly will. I mean, I don't even know how people go along with this stuff anymore. You're supposed to, everyone, the world leaders, the guys like Joe Biden gets the COVID coming and going, Jacinda Trudeau gets the COVID coming and going, no matter how many times he's boosted. But somehow we're still supposed to go along with the idea of vaccine passports if some guy in the English Midlands wants to go and lie on a beach in Greece.
Let me tell you how ridiculous it is. So we had vaccine passports. We dropped over $100 million developing something that was never going to work. And we had outbreaks in passport-protected gyms, for instance, and they turned around and blamed the unvaccinated who were locked in their homes at the time for the outbreaks in their vaccine passport-protected gyms. Now, this is what digital ID is going to be like. They say it's for our safety, for our protection. And I can tell you, if you look at China, digital identity and digital tyranny, where your phone becomes the government's ability to stalk you, has never kept a single person safe. What it does is enable the government to become this big brother persecutor. And they say things like, well, I see you've been to a couple of McDonald's this week. That's in violation of your carbon credit allowance. So we're probably going to lock you out of the next service station. This is where digital ID leads to, and it's absolutely crazy. And people have to understand it's not a conspiracy theory. This stuff is in your legislation, and it is coming next year.
Yeah, that's true. It's all about the control. It's all about the control. The COVID is whatever it is, but the control is forever. That's the variant that will last until the end of time. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Always great to see you. We're going to stump it out, I think. Titch says, what do you do at 8 p.m. on Fridays? Well, wait a minute. 8 p.m. Monday to Thursday, I'm right here. So 8 p.m. on Friday, I like to relax by hanging upside down in my bondage dungeon with my favorite dominatrix. Wait a minute. I don't think I'm supposed to say that on television, am I? Rugby Mad says, should we remove taxpayer funding from universities that disrupt and block free speech, create a victim culture for perfectly safe students, and force totally alien concepts such as critical race theory as fact on students? Yeah, there's no reason why taxpayers should be funding indoctrination centres. And this is why my old colleague from The Spectator and The Telegraph, Boris Johnson, is such a nincompoop. There's a guy who, if you pull up quotes from his about Africans and Mohammedans and whatever, all through the decades, yet he got to be Prime Minister. And he presided over a funding system where basically the culture of free speech in which he prospered is to be crushed. Dan Wootton is here to wallop your Wednesday. No lack of free speech with Dan. What you got, Dan?
Mark, if that's what you get up to at 8 p.m, I'm like, oh my goodness, what are you doing during my show? My God. Mark, I'm going to test your pop culture knowledge. Do you watch The Chase? You know, the biggest game show around. Well, if so, I've got a treat for you. The Beast, Mark Lebet, joining my superstar panel tonight.
Okay, I'm going to stay tuned for that. I shall forego the late night bondage dungeon session. That's all with Dan. Best show on late night telly. Stay safe, stay free.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way.